Good morning. Welcome everyone to our worship this morning. Whether you are here at our outdoor service or watching from home, we are here together, united as one community, more together than alone. A few reminders for those of us who are here in person. Masks must be worn at all times and correctly, pinched over your nose and under your chin. If you forget your mask or your mask keeps slipping down your nose, we have adult and children's paper masks right over there. You also must check in, even if you're sitting outside in the sanctuary area, so that we can contact trace if needed. There are restroom facilities. You enter here behind me, go into the main doors through Adams Hall, and turn left down the hallways toward the sanctuary. If you are visiting for the first time, a special welcome to you. We are so glad that you chose to be with us today. I hope you feel warmly welcomed and that today's message speaks to you and that we will see you again. If you are here in person, braving the somewhat iffy weather, first of all, thank you. Please fill out the guest card so we can stay in touch with you. If you're at home, drop a line to welcome@eliotchapel.org, letting us know that you're here. And by the way, I'm Amy Stark, a member of Eliot Chapel, and I am doing the service today. Our opening words this morning are from Daniel C. Cantor. I would like the chance. Arriving on these shores of hope, abandon your cynicism, your despair, your short view of humanity, and look up and see that we are not alone. Arriving on these shores of hope, embrace the here and now, the blessings and the presence of holy things. Here now, we are together, and we are stronger for it. Whether forlorn or uplifted, let us enter worship as if it was a new matter, a new chance to light the way, a new day. And now, if you will rise, in body or in spirit, for our opening hymn, Comfort Me. The words are printed in your order of service.
Comfort me, O my soul. Good morning, everyone. Time for all ages in just a moment, but first, my name is Todd Stark. I'm Amy's husband. I'm a member of Eliot Chapel, and I'm a former chair of the board for Eliot Chapel. We have recently begun to say our covenant together as part of our worship. It is in your order of service. Please say it along with me. As a free congregation, we promise to put one another our mutual trust and support. To create beloved community, we promise to be kinder to each other than we have to be, to listen fully to each other with an open mind and heart, to speak responsibly and respectfully, to find ways to improve our church for all members and friends. So Time for All Ages, our story this morning is about Hav the Little Wave. Not too long ago, far out in the sea, a wave was born. Their name was Hav. Hav and their family first splashed in the currents of a deep, deep ocean, a long, long way from shore. Hav splashed about, learning how to be the best wave they could. First, Hav's parents taught their little wave to notice where they were needed. They told Hav that this was done in two ways, by watching and listening to the beams of the moon and the world all around. For example, twice a day they would rush towards the shores and make big, strong waves, sometimes angry for high tide. At low tide, they would back away in gentler, melancholy ripples, missing the shoreline. And always there were smaller jobs to be done. If a child dropped a shell in at the edge, Hav raced to make tiny circles of ripples. If Hav saw a small boat, they would become a slow ripple that oftentimes reached school children who would be giggle in the wake from Hav's boat. This in turn made Hav giggle. Hav could outline a current for a school of fish or splash for the fin of a dolphin. Some days, Hav felt pulled to form a curl and let the surfers use them like slides. Hav felt carefree in their perfect curl. Sometimes, Hav would not get to turn into the wave they wanted, because that was not the instructions of the moonbeams or the world around them. For example, sometimes there was no storm, but Hav felt angry, like they wanted to foam and swell anyway. At other times, Hav felt overexcited, wanting to curl and curl, but no surfers needed the curl. In these moments, Hav's parents gently reminded them, Hav, we see how you feel, but now is not the time to act. Remember, the next storm will help get all of your mad out, and there will be curls galore for all your excitement just around the bend. Despite not always being able to act on their big, big feelings, Hav loved their job. Hav also learned feelings were contagious. When Hav's parents first taught them to puff in big, angry, foamy waves for storms, Hav wouldn't even feel stormy at first. But the more they were around other waves feeling their stormy selves, the more their mood matched. Some days, Hav could hardly tell if they were in charge of themselves or their shape was in charge of them. One day, Hav's parents told Hav that they would soon meet the biggest challenge of all, to make yourself part of a tidal wave, the biggest and tallest of waves. As they all gathered to form the big, big wave, Hav felt anxious and wiggly, making repetitive circles and ripples, and try as they might, could not puff themselves. Hav was afraid for their life because they saw other waves ahead, crashing into the sides of the big sea wall, seeming to disappear, to no longer exist. Hav said to their family, I'm afraid. I don't want to disappear. And they looked at Hav and said, no worries, you're not just a wave. You are the ocean. We are the ocean. And Hav suddenly puffed as large as ever and foamed a great foam, but felt a great peace. The end.
If you will enter with me into the spirit of prayer and meditation, if you're able, straighten your spine, plant your feet on the ground, feel the earth below as you follow the breath of life inside of you and listen to these words of prayer. Loving and transforming grace, Spirit and source of life, who some call God, be with us now. Be with us in whatever we feel and face today, our own mix of joy and sorrow. Restorative love, help us to find the energy for action and purpose, to keep breathing deep and working our jobs and feeding our babies and schooling our children and managing our pains and caring for ourselves and our loved ones. Help us not to despair. Lead us toward a hope that rides out the worst and still plants seeds for tomorrow. Help us to remember our faith's beacon of principles, our covenant that creates beloved community. Remind us that we can do hard things together. Guide us as we search, build, and grow a more just, loving world. In the name of love, we pray. Amen. Every month at Eliot Chapel, we share our offerings with a local organization that shares our values and helps us to further our mission. In October, we're sharing our offering with Missouri Faith Voices. Missouri Faith Voices is a movement of people of many religious backgrounds and races committed to dismantling white supremacy and making racial equity a reality. We work with Missouri Faith Voices on voting rights and voter education, criminal justice, and ending the school-to-prison pipeline. If you're joining us online, you can contribute by mailing a check with shared plate in the memo line. Our address is on the website. Or you can text Eliot shared plate and the amount you want to give to 72356. That's 73256. Let us open our hearts and be a generous people. Will the greeters please come forward? Sorry, I didn't mean greeters. I meant, will the ushers please come forward to accept the offering? Sorry. Will the ushers now come forward with the offering? If I can find my page in all this wind. To the work of the church, we dedicate our lives, and these are offerings. Thanks. Church family, beloveds, for all those that I don't know and all those that I do, welcome again. It's really good to be here. It's exciting to see everybody out on the churchyard. I wondered what this would look like. I feel like I'm really far away, but that's okay. I'm starting to think of these outdoor services as Eliot's backyard porch service. So everybody that's watching from home is tucked inside, warm and cozy, and we're out here braving the weather. I think there should be a fire pit and some hammocks back there. It's just a suggestion for November, right? The last time I was physically in an Eliot pulpit to deliver a sermon, not on Zoom, was December 29th, 2019. And get this, my sermon was titled, All in Ordinary Time. Wow, did I have that timing wrong or what? A little over 2 months later, we were all in lockdown, obviously, with everyone proclaiming unprecedented times. Remember that phrase over and over? Nothing close to ordinary. And the awe that could be better described as fear and trembling, I think. This virus has torn at the fabric of us. This virus has thrown us into uncertainty, fear, and loss. With each surge we went through, each terrible graphic chart we saw with some wave of COVID deaths or hospitalizations, we were overwhelmed. Not to mention climate change events and social injustice. Even now, even 18 plus months in, I can't get used to this anything but ordinary life we're living. Hav, that little wave in our story, was actually my own expanded version of the author Mitch Albom's really short fable that, like many traditions, reminds us of our oneness, right? Our interdependence, and how this oneness can provide strength to calm literal and metaphorical waves. Hav's story can also be read as a nod to the biblical story of Jesus calming the stormy seas. It's one of several miracles in the gospel that Jesus performs. Jesus walks onto a boat, and of course the disciples faithfully follow him. And later, as Jesus is asleep through a powerful storm that tosses the boat in all directions, the disciples wake him and beg to be saved. He responds, "O you of little faith," and calms the storm. Even with the storm calmed, the disciples are still stunned and have not yet shaken their fear. While we aren't quick as you used to put faith in miracles, the story of the disciples' emotional rush is just as important. John Coakley, in commentary of this miracle story, writes, "The Gospel of Matthew does not try to sort out faith and fear. It leaves them together." Faith and fear, we experience both. In Hav's story, they are trembling in that fear of becoming a tidal wave, and yet they find peace when they are told, "You are the ocean, we are the ocean, you're part of this whole." We don't need to sort out faith and fear, we can leave them together. In fact, we can leave this whole messed up bunch of feelings we have and let them be there. Hasn't this last 18 plus months taught us that? We don't really have a choice, do we? We have seen this virus surge. We have been through our own emotional storms and surges, and just when we think we're managing them, well, a tragic news story or an injustice comes into view or something happens in our own lives, and we're a heap of emotional energy all over again. We have been mixed together, fear and faith and everything in between. Charles Darwin was one of the first to discuss our emotional lives and begin to theorize about why we even have emotions. All these decades later, we still don't have a good understanding of what emotions are or what they do, really. We have competing physiological, neurological, and cognitive theories that try to make sense of the happy, sad, and mad of life. We do know that some of these primitive systems of emotions help us seek out safety and bond together. We even know that chickens can feel sad. Did you know that we know that? And rats have been able to be tickled, and there's registered laughter. But that doesn't help us figure out what to do with emotions. We have endless self-help books with titles like 12 Easy Ways to Happiness or Calm Your Anxiety in 5 Steps. As a therapist, I know some of these books are helpful, but most of them really overpromise. When you're talking about something as complex as human feeling, there aren't simple solutions. Philosopher Martha Nussbaum says, emotions are powerful reminders of our vulnerabilities. She writes, emotions should be understood as the writer Proust calls them, geological upheavals of thought. I love that phrase. Thanks, Proust. In which people acknowledge, she goes on, the great importance for their own flourishing of things that we do not fully control, and thereby we acknowledge their neediness, our neediness before the world and its events. Our neediness before the world and its events. That statement powerfully expresses the waves of fear and loss and anger and, yes, even joy that this pandemic and social upheaval brought into focus for us. There is a neediness in us all, and oftentimes we feel like that little wave, overwhelmed, tossed into a tidal, not of our asking, beholden to the rules of the universe. And Nussbaum says our human response to the waves often is to deny them. She writes, human beings appear to be the only mortal finite beings who wish to transcend it. Thus, they're the only emotional beings who wish to not be emotional and to design for themselves a life which acknowledges that they have no place. We're either tossed about and full of emotion, or we can't even admit the ocean has waves. How then do we reach the other option, the peace that Hav felt in the face of this? How do we feel our fear and our faith together? If you're the skeptical sort, and as you use, I absolutely know you're out there, I can depend on the fact that you're probably going to ask, what good does fear and this mixed bag of emotions and faith get us anyway? After all, fear-based religion, fear-based politics, fear-based communities, which we've seen all too much of, they are not helping. They're creating division, otherness, harm, and destruction. There are no pat answers that I can give you for the sweeping question of letting faith and fear mingle safely, but it seems part of the answer lies in feeling these waves together. As the English mystic Julian of Norwich wrote long ago, in falling and rising again, we are always kept in the same precious love. I can say that the sanctuary of our church community has allowed me to ride many waves of feelings. Back when gathering for church was taken for granted, my husband and I would sit in the balcony I'm an introvert and an observer, so it's a good space for me. It always had just enough people to feel comfortable for myself and a perch from which to view the rest of this beloved community. I probably can't count the bad moods, the broken hearts, and the confusion I felt in the sanctuary, the things I brought with me. And not every time, but more often than not, I would leave with a sense of peace alongside whatever I was bearing on my shoulders that day. After talking with just a few others in the balcony and worshiping together and seeing the floor of the sanctuary mixed with all of those souls, I felt peace. Not because we solved a problem, not because we were all 100% supportive, not because we soothed one another, although all three of those things definitely have happened here, but because I was reminded the basics. I'm not alone. And in the suffering or the joy, I could be there together with all of you. If the fall of my mood matched the fall of another, we could ride the crest of the wave in tandem. Or the opposite. If the rise of someone else's joy met my fear, I could be reminded that this too shall pass. On one particular music Sunday, I'd been through a fearful experience with my child's health, which just a few days later turned out to be nothing of concern. But I came to church that Sunday with some of my greatest fears washing over me. The what-ifs of life, the possibilities of loss looming large, and then the music began. I don't remember the piece they played, sorry, musicians, but I remember feeling transformed. Initial tears of fear mixed with gratitude and the observation that all around me was joined. I still felt the what-ifs, but the ocean, the wholeness came clear into view. Not every Sunday at church will be like this, but this one was for me, and I bet you've had some of those too. Beloveds, faith and fear can live together, but I don't think it's some unknowable alchemy. I think that to recognize the sacred in one another, I think it's our hard work in community and being vulnerable together. For those of you who know me, it's not a shock that I'm about to quote Mr. Rogers. I did a whole sermon on it once. Sorry, I'm doing it again. Mr. Rogers is the source of emotional intelligence for so many of us kids growing up in the 70s. He made up songs, he acted out puppet shows, and talked to his community about our big emotions, our big questions. He once asked, "Did you talk to someone you love last night about the things you were wondering about?" When the what-if swims in our heads and emotions fill our hearts, we need people to wonder with. We need this hardworking, interdependent community to wonder together. As much as we have been forced apart in the pandemic, we've stayed connected. We're doing this work. And I feel more strongly than ever that communities like Unitarian Universalism are unique in their ability to be vulnerable together, to mix fear and faith. We can contain this mixed and jumbled mess of human emotions for two distinct reasons. The first, the container of sacred promises, the covenants we make that we've been reading here each Sunday recently. We can set a promise to take care of one another, and in it we will feel safe. You can feel safe in a lot of places, I know, a walk in the woods, a talk with a therapist or a friend, but here in community, a whole community can share, make mistakes, create, make some justice, instill equity, complain, celebrate, and reflect the spirit of life to each other safely because we covenant to make it so. Secondly, as you use, we have abundance as vast as an ocean. The covenants we now share are because the Puritans, which would eventually branch into congregational churches and Unitarians, formed a covenant way back in 1648 called the Cambridge Platform that gave us the ideas of congregational polity and connected communities, which in its most radical form breaks open the notion that churches had to have creeds and instead illustrates that we can be woven together through sacred promises and relationships. Here's just one piece. It reads, "Stones, timber, though squared, hewn, and polished, are not a house until they are compacted and united. So saints are not a church unless they are knit together. And although churches be distinct and therefore may not be confounded one with another, yet all ought to preserve church communion one with another." Way back in 1648. There are so many problematic things I could say about Puritan history in our country, but this just is not one of them. It gives rare weight to the notion that we could be bound to one another, yet free, united across differences. We don't need to think alike to love alike here, and that has opened our world to a richness of not just sacred stories, but art, poetry, philosophy, science, and most of all, the wisdom of all of those who have gone before us, guiding us to this day, this community. Each Sunday we pull from this vastness, this jumbled concoction of humanity, and wonder together about what it can mean and how to care for it. Beloveds, as our ancestors did, as our children will do as we journey now, remember, you are the ocean. We are the ocean. Let's get about the business of riding these waves together. May it be so. Amen. Now I think we're going to sing our closing hymn. I've got peace like a river. Again, if you'll rise in body or spirit as you're able, and the words are printed in your order of service.
I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got tears like
we leave here with the grace of covenant in our mind's eye and the will to create from the vast ocean that is us the peace we long for. Go in peace.